Today I had better start with an explanation of why I've chosen Statistics Without Tears for this video. What I'm going to do is to have a look at some of the data that is available and to look at some ways of examining the data without heavy statistical methods, without doing correlations, without looking at least mean squares, all of those things that statisticians talk about. I'm not going to be doing. My inspiration for this video and for the way I'm thinking about statistics is the work of Hans Rosling. And if you've never heard of Hans Rosling, he was professor of health medicine in Sweden, and he's done some extraordinary videos that you can find online. If you just put into your favorite search engine the words Hans Rosling and the best stats you've ever seen, you'll find his TED Talk from 2006. And I found that as inspiration. I hope you will take time now to go and look at it if you haven't looked at it before, and take inspiration from it also. Now, what Hans Rosling does in that video is to use some extraordinary software for displaying data visually. What I would add, though, is that video is nearly 20 years old now. It was made in 2006, and since then a huge amount of development has taken place. He was custom building software. There's no need to do that now. Anybody can do those videos and moving data using software called Tableau. Tableau is commercial software that is expensive, it's professional, it costs over £1,000 for a copy of the software, and it's changing all the time. It's excellent, and they've always been very generous to teachers and students. If you're a teacher and a student, you can apply to them for a year's license to try it out. So if you think that Hans Rosling is doing something you'd like to do, try Tableau. If you're not keen on Tableau, there are similar functions available in open access software like R that can do similar things. So there's a lot to be done with data. But what I'm going to do in these videos is not use that all singing or dancing software. I'm not going to use anything except the facility that's available in any spreadsheet to draw a graph, to look at data graphically. So that's what I'm going to do. And Hans Rosling says we need to look at the data. Well, there's two things about that. We need to look at the data, that's to say know what the data is and what's available. But we also need to visualize it. We need to be able to put it in a format that allows us to interpret it easily. So first things first, since 2006, a lot has changed. More and more data is available online. You can download data in a way we would have dreamed of doing this when I was a master's student back in the 1970s. International data was not available. Today, you can go to the UNESCO Institute of Statistics and download thousands of data points about hundreds of countries. So it's literally easy to get hold of some data. Other organizations, not just UNESCO Institute for Statistics, but the World Bank and other organizations are making more data available. And even national systems, national ministries of education are putting online information about how their schools function, where they function, what achievements. And that's not counting things like OECD, PISA, all of the data that's available, readily available. That's changed a great deal in the past 50s. It's even changed in the last 20 years since the time when Rosling was talking about this. Organisations have become more standardised, they have improved the interfaces, you can get hold of more data. And what Rosling was saying is we should look at the data. If you're going to explain something, you should explain what's really happening. And I'm going to be looking at that. We don't want to, as he argues, be explaining the world as it appeared to our teachers. We want to explain the world as it is for us today. So those are the first things. But the other thing to say about looking at the data is looking is important. The eye is a wonderful tool for interpreting and evaluating data. And that means if you look at data in tables, I'll explain why later, I've chosen data from Mexico. I've downloaded all of this data that I'm going to be looking at in these videos from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics and put it into spreadsheet form. And if you put it into a table, you get something that's clearly describes the world as it's reported to UNESCO. But nothing stands out immediately to you in that data. In contrast with that, if we put it into a graph, good spreadsheet software will allow you to put a graph into the data in a couple of clicks, and you get the data showing up in visual format like this. It changes what you see immediately. If you look at that data just without any analysis, without anything, a number of things stand out to you. And let's have a look at what we're looking at. I've got in this graph the years along the bottom, so we're looking at progression through time, and the height of the bars indicates the size of the school-age population, the size of the population of compulsory school age in Mexico between 1998 and the present day, more or less, as the most recent data is there. Let's go away from the actual graph that I've got there, and let me draw a stylized version of that graph. And what we're looking at is, you can see there's a trend, a nice smooth trend. Now, smooth trends normally mean that the data is quite good. If the data is not very good, you'll see a lot of jumping about, a lot of random error, and just looking at the data, you get a sense of the quality. Between those major jumps, the data looks to be of fairly good quality. We're looking at fairly steady trend lines. But something very strange happens in 2001 and in 2011. We see a sudden jump in the graph. And what's happened there is that in those two occasions, in this occasion, the Mexican government increased the length of compulsory schooling from 9 years to 12 years. And if you increase the length of compulsory schooling, you of course, at a stroke, increase the number of people who are of compulsory school age. Going from 9 years compulsory education to 12 years compulsory education, a third more young people are included in that group of children of compulsory school age. In 2010, 2011, the Mexican government again increased compulsory school age from 12 years to 14 years, and again, if you increase the length of compulsory schooling, the population of compulsory school age goes up by 2 years against 12, so 1/6 and a sixth of extra people are added on, and you can see there the effect. Now, that means we're not comparing like with like over those 3 phases. The 3 phases are drawing on different age groups, a different age cohort is being used in each case. We could try to compensate for that. What I've done in the graphs that I will show you is I've said, let me take that bit off and let me carry on that continuation over, and then again here, let me take that bit off and I'll show you that curve as it appears in the spreadsheet when I do that graphically. So there's the first thing, that just looking at the data in graphical form allows us to see, without even a thought, something extraordinary happened in those 2 years, and we can go start looking for the explanation. And the explanation isn't difficult to find. It's a change in length of compulsory education produces that change. But we're also going to be interested in that underlying curve, and let me say that's importantly levelling off. Back in the 1990s, the school-age population was increasing very rapidly. The school-age population was rising very fast, and it's gradually levelled off. Now, when I first went to Mexico in the 1980s, the school-age population was doubling every 10 years. The rising number of children in the schools was incredible. For a Europeans expected that line to be more or less level. And it was apparent, just looking around you in the streets, that if you went to Mexico, you would see young children everywhere. When my brother-in-law first came to the UK, looked around London and said, "What have you done with all the children?" The fertility rates were quite different, and we had a kind of expectation that Latin American countries, the population was rising very quickly, and we had an expectation that in Europe the populations were not rising very quickly. So that was our kind of stereotypical expectation that a Latin American country, the population would be going up very rapidly. In a country like France or the UK, the population was more or less static or even dropping. And that was a kind of stereotype. We looked at the world. I think you'll see a similar thing reflected in the case that the data that Hans Rosling is putting on the screen in his talk. And that was not wrong. But if you stay with that expectation, you will see the world wrongly. If we look now at Mexico, you saw that if you take out the effect of increasing the length of compulsory schooling, the curve has leveled out. It actually goes this way and may even now be dropping. It may be looking more like France did 40 years ago. In contrast with that, France has started rising. And so if we try to explain what was happening 40 years ago with the images we have in our mind, here's the exact graph for France. You can see that the picture is the school-age population was decreasing and now it's increasing. Here's the exact picture for Mexico. You can see that the school-age population was increasing but is now peaked reached a maximum and is now dropping off again. And that's a very important lesson. That's a very important lesson to not be trying to explain what the world was like 40 years ago. And so you want to, I would argue that you need to look at some data. I would argue, to put the case as strongly as possible, every master's thesis and every doctoral dissertation should start off with the background statistics, representing the background to what is to be explained. That's overstating it, of course. Not every thesis and dissertation needs to be starting with statistics, but it doesn't do any harm to root what we're doing in the world as it actually is, rather than trying to represent the world as it was when our teachers were young and studying themselves. So don't look at the world as I look at it. Make sure you check the data and that you're explaining the world as it is for you.